Salutations once again to the Truth Core, whoever and wherever you may be on the planet. This is once again yours truthfully, John Lash, with the final and 13th installment of Mythology 101. And the title of this talk is Your Role in Sophia's Correction. So, hang with me. I will get there. You know how I can be. A little long on the T's before the hard squeeze. And if I handle myself well, it will be a mutual climax for all concerned. First, though, I have some reflections on the course and on my future course of teaching. So I'd like to tell you where I go next. Be assured that I am deeply grateful for those of you who have followed this course. It's yours, free for the taking. It's there online. You have all the talks. Review them, download them, use them to your benefit. I send out my thanks, personal and transpersonal, to those of you who have joined Nemeta as visitors, and even more so, to several of you, it appears, who have found the occasion of this course as a prompt to join the staff at Nemeta. I call the members the staff, because Nemeta is a modern mystery school, and one of the characteristics of such a school is that you, as a participant in the school, run the school. This will be the last series of talks that I release on the internet for free. So those of you who want to follow my work, written and spoken, can find it on Nemeta from this moment on. Now, visitors who go to Nemeta can already access tremendous amount of material without subscribing as members. For instance, you can access all the landing pages of all the courses. You can read the text. Some of those landing pages have introductory talks. And you can join the Planetary Tantra forum, and you can access all the material I produced on Planetary Tantra free on Nemeta as visitors. As members, you have access to new material, which is constantly added each week. That includes written and spoken material. You also have access to the members forum, and you have access to yours truthfully. So if you want to communicate to me directly as a member, you're welcome to do so. Up to this moment, which is November 2020, I have released over more than 12 years, 14 years, tremendous amount of free material on the internet. There are hundreds of talks, including interviews, and there is a tremendous amount of written material you can find on the internet. I don't need to explain myself to anyone, but as a gesture of respect, I'll tell you that I've decided not to release any more free material simply due to practical considerations. My legacy has numerous dimensions. Oh, yes, it does. And Nemeta stands central to my legacy. So I intend to devote myself entirely to maintaining and building Nemeta. Hence, I've made this decision. However, there is one exception, and I established this exception before I decided that this would be my last free offering on the internet. The exception concerns a certain book that was released in the United States this summer, which touches profoundly on my area of expertise, namely the ancient mysteries and specifically the use of psychedelic or entheogenic Eucharist in the mysteries, the use of a psychoactive potion. I've written extensively about that. Now someone has come out of left field with a book about it without, however, citing me. I take this as a challenge, so I'm going to address that book and its author openly on the internet. And I'm doing so with an eye toward the release next year of the 15th anniversary edition of Not in His Image, which will have significant revisions in it. So I'm doing a free talk, yes, one last series, but I'm doing it on practical terms with the intention to promote interest in Not in His Image and also to counter the arguments that are presented in this book. You may have heard of this book. It's called The Immortality Key, a very bad title, by Brian Marorescu. And there was an interview with the author on Joe Rogan that gleaned about 3.5 million views in the first couple of weeks, or the first week that it was up. So I intend to answer point by point some of the claims the author makes in that interview, and I also intend to address certain issues in his book. So that's where I go from here. Continuing from there, I'd like to address 3 points regarding the material in this course. First off, of course, there are a lot of loose ends. I really just patched it together off the top of my head, and I did so rapidly. No doubt you have questions to ask. You have problems, perhaps, with certain issues, and certainly there were omissions in that course. One specifically was the theme of the Messiah. I did not specifically or explicitly address that theme. Now, obviously, this is a huge theme in comparative mythology and world religion, isn't it? In fact, I rank that theme, or mytheme, as Mircea Eliade suggested, as belonging to the top 5 mythemes in the entire inventory of comparative mythology drawn from all races and cultures through history. It belongs, actually, in the category of salvationism. So the idea that humanity in some way needs to be saved implies that there is a savior figure who is called the Messiah. Now, there are 2 operative terms for the Messiah. One of them comes out of the Hebrew file. It goes back to the Hebrew word meaning the anointed, Mashiach, and comes ahead in Greek translation to Christos. You know, Christos is not the name of a person. It's a designation meaning the anointed one. And there is a third term, soter, S-O-T-E-R, generally translated as Savior. So there's a subcategory of these studies called soteriology, which means the investigation of those myths that describe a Savior, Messiah figure. Now you may wonder, and I certainly trust that you do now wonder, how to approach that topic. Remember, all the clues in the world don't count if you don't know what crime has been committed. You do not just approach comparative mythology now that you are apprentices, in a blind sort of way with curiosity or just a general interest. Gee, I wonder what I would find out if I went and read some mythological narratives about saviors, No, you don't do that. You come with a question. And the question is your forensic tool for working your way through the material rather than getting swamped in it and coming away with your head spinning. The first question you can ask, for instance, is, well, how does the role and figure of the Messiah play across the inventory of mythic narratives? Do you find it in various mythologies? And how are the different messianic figures in those mythologies to be compared to each other? Of course, I'm not going to elaborate on that. I leave you with the challenge. If it entices you, I will just point out one conclusion that I have drawn. The role and figure of the messianic agent in the Hebrew file is entirely unique. It stands on its own as an anomalous case, you see. And regarding the question of Messiah figures to be found in other mythologies or in worldwide religious systems such as Islam or Christianity, that is a question to approach with great caution. As a matter of fact, you don't find a parallel or equivalent Messiah anywhere that fits the profile of the Hebrew file. You would know by now why that is the case. So take various figures, for instance. The Viracocha from Incan and South American and Mesoamerican mythology. Quetzalcoatl among the Aztecs. Krishna among the Hindus or Hindu Vedic mythology. The Buddha, the historical Buddha, and others. Well, are these messianic figures? No, strictly speaking, they are not. They are not messianic figures. They are represented as spiritual guides, you could say. Now, what about the Gnostic Fosters? P-H-O-S-T-E-R. The Gnostic Revealer, the illumined teacher. Is the Gnostic Foster a messianic figure? Absolutely not. You see, the fundamental rule of the messianic figure that you find in the Hebrew file is that it operates within a salvationist program. And there is no salvationist program in Gnosis. The challenge of Gnosis is not to be saved. The challenge is to learn what it is to be part of this divine experiment and find your part in it. Also, on that note, it would be worth repeating a proposition that I stated in the Gaian navigation experiment. You know, there are many spiritual teachers from the past and so-called self-assumed teachers today who would claim something like this. Well, it's a great mystery and adventure to be here living in this world, and everyone who is a genuine seeker, everyone in the Truth Corps is looking for the truth about why we're here and what is the purpose of it, and everyone has a piece of the truth. It's like a jigsaw puzzle on a table. You come with one piece, someone else comes with another piece, I come with another piece. Everyone has their piece to contribute to the solution of the puzzle. I do not concur with that view. I said in the Gaian navigation experience going on 7, 8 years ago, in the Sophianic view of life, you know the entire solution and you find your place in it. You commit to the entire solution. You do not carry merely one piece of the solution. You know the entire solution, and you find and enact your role in that solution. And that is the bottom line of what I teach. How then do you know the total solution? Well, Sophia's correction is the solution. And you know Sophia's correction by learning the home story, the fallen goddess scenario, and carrying that forward into the world drama as it unfolds right here, right now. By the way, I said Gaian navigation experience, and it was indeed an experience and continues to be. But I meant, of course, Gaian navigation experiment, GNE for short. And you can find that on Nemeta. On to the second point. I maintain the view that Christianity and also Islam in another way are simply outgrowths of Judaism, which, as you know, is an expression of the Hebrew mythogen. And so I observe continuity of program and purpose from the Old Testament, the Torah, and the Talmud, coming forward to Christianity, and coming forward, that would be the New Testament, and then coming forward to the Apocalypse. So when you look at the Bible, you see one program presented from different angles and through different means of deployment, different means of implementation. Now, I haven't spoken about the Apocalypse in these talks, but it certainly is a mythological theme that requires close investigation. Again, of course, I can't go into it here, but I can provide you with a really strong warning. The meme of the great beast is common today in internet parlance. In fact, it is widely used by those sincere and diligent truth seekers who want to oppose the program of the globalist masterminds. And so I'm sure you've heard the frequent allusion to the great beast and 666. The way that the theme presents itself goes like this. Well, 666 is the barcode. 666 is the mark of the beast. And the beast, Tomega Therion, the great beast of the Apocalypse, is the satanic horror that faces the world, and we must oppose and defeat the great beast. I need to warn you that those who take that view, sincere as they are miseducated in regarding the true nature of the great beast. Now, there's a series of talks on Nemeta called Gnostic Sabotage in the Book of Revelation. And in this series, I explain that there is something strange about the appearance of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, and the scarlet woman, and the signature of 666 in the Apocalypse, the book of Revelation, which is the last book of the Bible. And I've explained that the figure in that text is completely inconsistent with what scholars call Jewish apocalypticism. Scholars maintain that there is a textual and thematic continuity coming forward from certain Jewish prophets, such as Ezekiel, Daniel, and Isaiah, leading directly to the book of Revelation. In certain ways, that is correct. But as regards the figure of the scarlet woman who rides the great beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, and the mark of the beast, that is not correct. Those elements are inconsistent with Jewish apocalypticism. And I've shown that there is another identity for the beast. And this view, this interpretation, I call Gnostic sabotage. So I advise you, although I cannot elaborate further at this moment, in this context, I advise you to consider that there are two faces to the beast of the apocalypse. And the other face, the unknown face, actually reveals the Aeon Sophia, the planetary animal mother herself. She is Tomega Therion. She is the great beast which has the power to oppose and overthrow the salvationist program of the Hebrew Father God and his Son, the Messiah. It is entirely wrong, and this is an unfortunate error for those who are opposing the globalist mastermind system today to use the term the beast system and to talk about the great beast in this way, in the way that they do. For one thing, let me make it clear, the globalist system of technocracy, based on the Hebrew program of deceit, division, and domination, ain't coming from any beast. A beast is a living animal creature. You are a beast. I am one hell of a beast. And the beast is not your enemy. The true beast is your ally. And 666 is not a number to be afraid of. 666 is the number of the beast. It all depends on how you calculate it. And the way I calculate it is by addition. What do you get? If you add those three numbers, you get 18. And what is 18? Well, you have to get involved in planetary Tantra to know the significance of the number 18. But it is most certainly not a symbol or weapon of the alien mindset that is attacking humanity through the globalist technocracy, transsexualism, transhumanism, and all that perverted trash. Finally, the third point I wish to make, before I get to the point, is about what I said about the xenosh. Remember, there are two categories of xenosh: the racially defined xenosh and the non-racial. And the non-racial are the enablers and allies of the xenosh, and they are to a certain extent wannabes. They want to be like the xenosh because they see the xenosh as, a special group, an elite group with a special mission. And they want to be part of that mission and facilitate it. So I noted that those who subscribe to the Abrahamic religions, that is to say Christianity and Islam, are also xenosh, but not exclusively so. There are also secular-minded people who don't subscribe to any religion, and they are also servants of the xenosh. So I did not mean to imply that the religionists of the Abrahamic program are the only non-racial xenosh. There are others as well. Atheists, Darwinists, so-called materialists, whom I would define, however, as people who are entirely ignorant of the true nature of the material world. All right, so far so good. Now let's get to my concluding remarks. And they go like this. How can you play a role in Sophia's correction? Just asking for a friend. Well, there are two ways. I use the model of the Lorentz strange attractor to describe Sophia's correction. Go look it up, Lorenz. It's a famous icon in the field of chaos theory or complexity theory, which is closely related to fractals and the Mandelbrot set, which I have also discussed at great length. The Lorentz strange attractor presents the image of something like a butterfly, but with one wing larger than the other. So there are two loops in the attractor, the large loop and the small loop. Those two loops represent the area of human life where Sophia's correction is now unfolding. The large loop is the collective. The smaller loop is the Gnostic elite, for lack of a better term, the truth core to which you belong. But you are only a Gnostic in the truth core if you observe and preserve the true premium Gnostic intel. So in the larger loop, Sophia's correction is happening in the collective, entirely independent of any knowledge of the fallen goddess scenario, the Gnostic intel, planetary tantra, any of that. It's happening in that way according to the terms of the collective psyche, both the exopsyche, which is that which can be spoken and enacted openly, and the collective endopsyche, which is the subconscious of the masses, what Jung called the collective unconscious. It's not really unconscious, it's subconscious. Many people are conscious of things, but they cannot speak of them. They are not at liberty to speak freely of them. Once they start to speak freely of what they feel and know and sense, then the activity passes into the exopsyche. It passes through what is called the Overton window, that which is acceptable to discuss. But it is a very great fact that many tads, many human animals in the collective, sense the truth, and they subconsciously know what is right and what is wrong. Remember the Greek word for correction, the diorthosis. Remember I said that the prefix di represents division, duality. So in fact, there are two modes of Sophia's correction. One of them unfolds in the collective sphere, the big loop, the collective realm, without any knowledge whatsoever of what Gnostics know through direct input to the Aeon Sophia. Gnostics occupy the center or seed point of the small loop. So in the small loop, correction proceeds in a certain way due to those who participate being deeply informed about the fallen goddess scenario and everything that the Gnostics taught in the past, relevant to the present, as well as the living gnosis today, which is an ever-evolving, ongoing activity. So those in the know, in the gnosis, occupy the small loop. Those who are oblivious to that occupy the large group. And Sophia is implementing her correction simultaneously in both groups, or in both loops, to refer back to the image of the Lorentz strange attractor. So how do you find and enact your role in Sophia's correction? Well, you can do it in the large loop. You can do it by committing your life to being an anti-reset activist. And many, many people are doing that as I speak. There are countless videos to be found on the internet showing people standing up to the state challenging the authorities, defying the rules and regulations for preventing the spread of the virus. Remember that the narrative of the virus is the virus, and it's a fear-driven narrative. I don't deny that there might be some strain of coronavirus that came out last season, and that might be particularly nasty. There are over 40 strains of coronaviruses, if you believe in the basic concept of a virus, and they are natural events in nature. Our species and other species as well have adapted to viruses seasonally through the millennia. No problem. Even the CDC, the Center for Disease Control in the United States, admitted in September that in the first months of 2020, in the United States, there were about 9,400 deaths that could be accurately attributed to you know what. There are, of course, many more deaths falsely attributed to it. But 9,400, they admitted that themselves. That is on the level of the normal seasonal flu. It's the narrative about that flu that is the virus. And that narrative comes from the alien archontic mindset. So yes, there are countless numbers of TADs in the large loop, and more every day, exponentially increasing numbers who are assuming the role of anti-reset activists and struggling to take back their lives. The program of the transhumanist technocrats intends to ruin everyone's life permanently. So many people are realizing that, as we say in the USA, it's up against the wall, motherfucker. And unless they resist and defy the authorities, they will never get their lives back. And this is a good thing. This is a good development. And it can only get better. The globalist masterminds cannot not fail. They cannot get away with it. I am certain of that. And I am certain that the evidence and proof of that is becoming obvious in the large loop. So if you want to place yourself there, completely independent of all this fancy, mysterious, esoteric, premium intel coming from the living gnosis today, there you are. Do it. That's how you will fulfill your role. But remember that I said that during the Gaian navigation experiment, I elaborately developed another concept of reset. Reset of the divine experiment by the Aeon Sophia herself. Now, if you want to move over and migrate into the small loop, you have to have that intel. You qualify yourself to be a participant in that reset, in Sophia's reset, in that way and that way only. It's only the premium Gnostic intel that allows you to take that role. When you look at the large loop, when you look at the turmoil and turbulence that's happening in the world due to the insanity and absurdity of the so-called anti-COVID measures, the measures of prevention, the measures falsely proposed for public safety, what do you see? Or perhaps a better question would be, how does that activity in the large loop look to the Aeon Sophia? What does she observe there? What does she expect to see there? How is it of interest to her? The question may appear complicated and metaphysical, but really it isn't. I can assure you that she sees all of that as a test of sanity. She designed the human genome with her consort, Thelete, in the galactic center. The sacred narrative tells you that, and no other mythic narrative in the world ever has presented such a description of human origins. She knows how you are designed because she designed you. She knows the 7 components of the human genome. And she also knows that human animals need to be tested in order to see if they can fulfill their endowment. You have a divine endowment. Nous is divine intelligence. You are not divine. You are not a god. You cannot become a god. But you have a germ of divine intelligence, and everything depends on how you use it. You see? And that's what she's looking at. And one of those faculties is called probity, the probative faculty. That is a faculty of the human animal to investigate events and situations and seek evidence to draw conclusions. That's the probative faculty. So she is observing how human animals in the collective are exercising their probative faculty. For instance, in asking for the evidence to show that there is an extremely lethal, extremely contagious strain of coronavirus rampaging across the planet. Where's the evidence? The evidence to show that masks protect people from this supposed virus. Where's the evidence? And many people, many tads, are beginning to ask where the evidence is. You see? So that is how it works in her view. It's a test of sanity for the human species as a whole. What I'm saying there, I trust that you can gather from what I'm saying there, that proposition, that view of events holds true, whether or not you know anything about Gnosis or the Sophianic view of life. This is a test of sanity. Are there going to be enough tads willing to exercise their probative faculty and exercise their willpower to reclaim their lives or not? It's just as simple as that. Now, in conclusion, and coming around the bend and heading for the hard squeeze after the long tease, I will leave you with 2 gems of the living Gnosis today. 2 gems that only a Gnostic can know. The first gem concerns the way that a divine experiment unfolds over the long term. To the Aeons, 1 day of time in their dimension is 25,920 years, roughly 26,000 years. To the Aeon Sophia, 26,000 years is a day in her time. That means that every 108 days of your life and the life of everything that unfolds on this planet occurs for her in 1 second. Now, Gnosis reveals that a divine experiment such as ours is set up in a particular time frame, and this is no different than would be done in a laboratory. I often think of Mendel, the monk who developed the taxonomy of species and genus. He experimented with peas, and he developed a complex system of taxonomy for describing the genetic development of different species. And the way that he did so was that he would plant crops of peas, and then he would allow them to grow in a certain way for a certain time, and then he would harvest them, or he would modify them, or introduce some kind of procedure for a hybrid, and then he would let that go for a certain period of time. This is how scientists and biologists operate in a laboratory. For instance, if you have a culture in a dish, you put it in a Petri dish, and then you leave it for a certain period of time, which may be 2 hours, 2 days, or 2 weeks. Then at the end of that time, the biologists can go in and they can modify the culture in the dish. They can, for instance, clear out mold if mold occurs, or they may inject some new ingredient into the culture, and then they watch it again for a designated period of time. So the designated period of one aeonic day is 26,000 years. And we are about 200 years from the end of that great cycle. According to the protocols observed by the Aeons, there would be no opportunity to change or modify the culture in this experiment until the end of the day. But that, however, is not the case. Due to the fact that the Aeon Sophia is actively present in this experiment here on the planet, that she indwells the planet, she is in material immanence, she can intervene directly before the end of the Aeonic day. And she has done so. She reset this experiment during 3 years from March 2011 to March 2014. And now, correction is fully underway. But it is underway at her pace. You see? 1 second, 108 days. 10 seconds, 1,080 days. Or about 3 years. So 3 years is only 10 seconds to her, you see? But the experiment has been reset. She actually changed the culture in the divine experiment in which you are participating. And how exactly did she do that? Well, that is something to be learned. That is something to be discovered moment by moment in the practice of gnosis. But I can give you one primary example of her reset. What it implies. According to the sacred narrative, the fallen goddess scenario, there were actually 9 experiments in planetary worlds involving the propagation of the very same genomic plasm from which you evolve. The Anthropine species has already been active in 9 other planetary experiments in the galactic arms of this galaxy. And so, the designation for the current experiment is A10, or Anthropos 10. Following the usual protocols, it would not be possible to mutate Anthropos 10 within the limits of the experiment until the end of a kalpic day. And even then, it would be a really tricky thing to do. So, what's different now? The difference is, due to Sophia being present and interactive with the human species, those who choose to be her witnesses and allies at least, she can produce a higher mutation of our genomic construction now, existentially. And that higher mutation is called A11. So what is actually happening in Sophia's reset is that there is a genetic mutation of the human species. That occurs through what is called epigenesis. Go study it. And look in particular at the discovery of an enzyme called reverse transcriptase. The scientist, the biologist who discovered this enzyme showed that RNA can rewrite DNA, and therefore a species can mutate by having its own code rewritten, not externally, but by itself, through its own internal processes. Sophia's correction carries the opportunity for some members of the human species to reprogram and rewrite their own code and mutate into another version of the human animal, A11. Now, I'd just like to point out in concluding that when you have Gnostic intel like that, there is a practice to follow. You always want to look for what is called the opposite, the correspondence to that in the program of the Archons. And where do you find it? Well, it's not hard to find. You may have heard that some people are claiming, and these are people who are against the Great Reset and against the vaccine, they're claiming that this vaccine proposed for you-know-what actually has the ability to mutate the RNA and DNA of the human animal. They're claiming that. Some very serious, concerned people are claiming that. What do I have to say about that? I don't concur with that view. I do not believe that is the case. First of all, I do not believe that the transhumanist technocrats can alter human DNA and RNA. I'm sure they want to, but I do not personally believe they have that capacity. However, it greatly benefits their program if people think that they do have that capacity, even those people who are fighting against them. I maintain that those people are in error. I allow that the vile, perverted transhumanist might be able to damage DNA or RNA, but they cannot mutate it in any particular direction of their choice, so that they would, in effect, re-engineer the human genome and remake us in their image. The perpetrators may say that, and their enemies may also say that, but I don't say that. I say that the purpose of the vaccine is to harm, maim, kill, and cause handicap and dementia. Period. That's all. Why then do they claim, on both sides of the game, that it is intended to modify RNA and DNA? It creates hype. It's a form of hype. It gives a grandiose dimension to that threat. Do not embellish threats. Do not add to the hype. As a living Gnostic today, I can tell you that there is a true opportunity for epigenetic mutation of our species by the rewriting of DNA via RNA, via reverse transcriptase. And that is a biological fact. Go look at it. There's a lot of material about epigenesis on the internet. There are long lectures about it on YouTube. So the second gem concerns that opportunity, the mutation to A11. That's not going to happen in the large loop. It can only happen for those and through those who have the directive intelligence to make it happen. And on that note, I will say, enough said, but not quite. I would like to leave you with a saying that goes around among the Shaktas, those who are bonded to the power and beauty of the planetary animal mother. And the saying goes like this: the outcome of the world trauma turns on one life at a time. Enough said. And I'll be seeing you, well, you know where.